The alarm rang loudly, slicing through the calm of the early morning and jolting everyone awake. But this was not just another ordinary day. Inside a busy office, tension had been simmering quietly for weeks, almost imperceptible to outsiders, yet impossible for those involved to ignore. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken words, sideways glances, and subtle signs of discomfort that seemed to hang over every desk like a storm cloud waiting to break. Employees went about their routines, pretending not to notice the growing friction, but everyone who paid attention could feel the invisible pressure mounting. Then it happened. A careless, sharp remark was aimed at someone purely because of their skin color, a comment thrown casually into a space that demanded respect. At first it seemed insignificant, almost trivial, something easily brushed aside, but its effects would ripple far beyond the moment. The atmosphere froze instantly, conversations halted mid-sentence, and everyone felt the weight of a moment that would change everything. Our protagonist, the center of this story, was an ordinary-looking person, yet within them lay a quiet resilience that few could recognize at first glance. They had always preferred to keep to themselves, concentrating on their work and avoiding unnecessary conflict, striving to rise above the negativity that surrounded them. Despite being aware of subtle prejudices in the office, they maintained their dignity, never letting small acts of cruelty distract them from their goals. Life, however, has a way of testing patience and character, and sometimes circumstances demand a response when tolerance reaches its limits. This story is not merely about racism. It is a tale of courage, consequences, and the unforeseen justice that arises when hate meets its match. Each moment of discomfort the protagonist endured only strengthened their resolve, preparing them for what was to come. By the end, it would be clear that even the smallest spark of hate can trigger an unstoppable chain of events. Walking into the office every morning, the protagonist could feel the weight of judgment before a single word was spoken, sensing glances and subtle whispers that spoke louder than any direct insult. Their coworkers, often unaware of the consequences of their actions, assumed it was acceptable to belittle or mock others, basing judgments solely on skin color or background. And yet, amidst the silent hostility, there existed a quiet strength, a subtle confidence that this story would unfold in an unexpected way. The protagonist's ability to remain composed under pressure highlighted the contrast between integrity and ignorance, showcasing a power that was rarely acknowledged. The tension in the office was like a powder keg, small incidents accumulating into a moment that demanded attention. Every sideways glance, every whispered comment carried weight, and those who noticed understood that change was imminent. In these small, seemingly insignificant moments, true character and resilience are often revealed in the most powerful ways. As the story develops, the escalation of tension becomes clear, revealing how minor microaggressions can snowball into situations that cannot be ignored. Karma, justice, and human decency converge in subtle yet undeniable ways, reminding everyone that actions have consequences far beyond immediate perception. The protagonist, while appearing calm, was mentally preparing for the moment that would define the office's social and moral balance. Their patience and quiet determination contrasted sharply with the antagonist's arrogance, making it clear who would ultimately emerge with dignity intact. The instigator believed their behavior would remain unnoticed, their prejudice hidden beneath a mask of authority. Yet each careless word and judgmental glance planted seeds that would soon bear the fruit of accountability. By observing and analyzing the environment carefully, the audience can sense that something transformative is about to occur, setting the stage for a dramatic reversal. The office itself seemed ordinary, ruled by deadlines, meetings, and mundane routines. But beneath the surface, tension simmered like a hidden flame. The protagonist, talented and diligent, had spent months quietly navigating this environment, earning praise from some while subtly drawing envy and ire from others. Among the staff was one individual whose arrogance and prejudice were barely concealed, their condescension woven into casual remarks and deliberate behaviors. This person believed that cruelty and domination were tools to assert power over those they considered inferior, unaware that their worldview was about to be challenged. Every day, the protagonist performed tasks with precision and professionalism, reinforcing their value silently. The office, a place meant for productivity, had become a battleground of subtle aggression and latent bias. It was only a matter of time before these tensions reached a tipping point, revealing the truth about character, integrity, and justice. At first, the day seemed routine, with the hum of computers, the rustle of papers, and the clinking of coffee mugs forming a backdrop to ordinary work. But in one meeting room, the tension that had been building finally erupted. The protagonist was presenting a critical project, one requiring focus, collaboration, and clear communication. As they spoke confidently, the antagonist whispered a remark just loud enough for a few colleagues to hear, a comment laced with racial bias meant to undermine the presenter. The words carried sting not because of ignorance, but because they were unnecessary, malicious, and revealing of deep-seated prejudice. Everyone in the room sensed the gravity of the insult, the conversation slowing as discomfort spread like a wave. In that moment, the seeds of a dramatic backfire were planted, unnoticed by the instigator but clear to those paying attention. The room grew tense, a hush falling over the employees as the weight of the remark settled. Some avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with the audacity of the behavior, while others internally bristled at the blatant disrespect. The protagonist, however, paused only briefly, recognizing the remark for what it was, a petty attempt at humiliation unworthy of a reaction. Inside, a quiet determination took root, signaling that this moment could mark a turning point. Outside the meeting, whispers began circulating, colleagues debating whether the comment would be formally addressed or silently ignored. Meanwhile, the antagonist, oblivious to the mounting consequences, believed their authority would protect them. Overconfidence, it turned out, was the first crack in their armor, exposing vulnerabilities they could not yet see. This early stage is crucial, illustrating not only the environment but also the complex web of personalities involved. The protagonist represents integrity and focus, working diligently despite the undercurrent of bias, while the antagonist attempts dominance through prejudice. The contrast between their approaches highlights the moral and psychological stakes at play. Every gesture, glance, and comment now carried weight, laying the foundation for what would become an undeniable turning point. Employees began to sense that the story would not end in the expected way. The tension, subtle yet powerful, had transformed the office into a place where character would be tested. Even the smallest interactions foreshadowed the eventual unraveling of the instigator's carefully constructed facade. Later that week, tension escalated further as the protagonist worked late, completing a report crucial to a major project. The antagonist, seeking to assert dominance once again, made a sarcastic remark aimed at undermining the protagonist's background and credibility. Unbeknownst to them, other colleagues had been observing quietly, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the instigator's ongoing behavior. The remark triggered a ripple effect, drawing reactions of shock, disapproval, and growing anger from witnesses. For a brief moment, the antagonist felt a sense of power, relishing the discomfort they caused. Yet simultaneously, the office environment began to shift, evidence of injustice quietly accumulating. Small acts of courage, discretion, and documentation were slowly but surely turning the tide. One colleague, who had witnessed months of subtle prejudice, began documenting the incidents carefully, understanding the importance of creating an accurate record. Another reached out to HR, detailing a pattern of discrimination that could no longer be ignored. The antagonist, unaware of these efforts, continued believing their actions would have no consequences. Meanwhile, the protagonist remained calm, focused solely on completing their work while allowing dignity and professionalism to speak louder than words. The admiration for the protagonist began spreading quietly, influencing co-workers' perceptions. The instigator's attempt to humiliate only highlighted their own pettiness in contrast to the protagonist's resilience. The foundation for a dramatic reversal was steadily being built, layer by layer. By the end of the day, hushed whispers evolved into open conversations, with employees sharing experiences and acknowledging the pattern of bias. The once hidden truth about the antagonist's behavior could no longer remain unnoticed. What was meant as an assertion of power instead exposed arrogance and vulnerability. The protagonist's response or lack of retaliation showcased strength of character and emotional intelligence. Colleagues began to recognize the courage required to maintain professionalism in the face of cruelty. These subtle shifts set the stage for leadership intervention and formal accountability. It became increasingly clear that this story was not about office politics, but about integrity, justice, and moral victory. Within days, the consequences of the racist act began to manifest in tangible ways. HR initiated formal reviews, influenced by documentation and reports provided by concerned employees. Upper management, previously unaware of the undercurrents, began noticing discrepancies between results and behavior. The antagonist, confident in their immunity, faced sudden scrutiny and investigation, blindsiding them completely. Their reputation, once assumed secure, began to erode in real time. The ripple effects of accountability, quiet at first, grew rapidly as colleagues lent support to the protagonist. Meanwhile, the protagonist quietly continued excelling, unaware of the growing recognition for their grace under pressure. Their project, once routine, received high praise from stakeholders, highlighting not only technical skill but the professionalism with which challenges were handled. Internal newsletters, client feedback, and social media mentions began reflecting positively on the protagonist. Each acknowledgement of excellence further contrasted with the antagonist's diminishing credibility. The ripple effect of integrity became increasingly visible throughout the office. Colleagues who had remained silent now began to voice support and admiration. The antagonist, sensing the shift but unsure how to respond, attempted to regain control with small displays of authority. These efforts only amplified the perception of incompetence and arrogance in contrast to the protagonist's quiet mastery. As tension in the office escalated, the antagonist's attempts at domination became more frequent but less effective. They tried to undermine colleagues, inject subtle fear, and reclaim authority, but each action backfired, highlighting flaws in judgment and character. Witnesses now felt emboldened, ready to document and report every instance of harassment or bias. The protagonist's focus, in contrast, remained unwavering, demonstrating consistency and reliability. Their dignity became a mirror reflecting the instigator's failure, making subtle cruelty impossible to disguise. The workplace, once dominated by covert prejudice, began transforming into a space that celebrated merit and integrity. The narrative of intimidation was collapsing as truth and courage prevailed. The turning point arrived unexpectedly during a high-stakes presentation, where the antagonist attempted one final display of authority. They made another subtle, biased remark, unaware that witnesses were prepared and evidence had been documented. Leadership intervened immediately, addressing the inappropriate comment publicly and correcting the behavior. Shock registered clearly on the antagonist's face as their assumed power evaporated in real time. The audience, previously tense, now felt relief and recognition of justice being served. The protagonist observed calmly, their composure intact, embodying the principle that integrity outlasts arrogance. In this pivotal moment, roles reversed, the instigator exposed, the protagonist vindicated, and the office transformed. Colleagues who had previously remained silent now felt validated and inspired by the protagonist's unwavering composure. They began openly sharing stories and acknowledging patterns of discrimination that had been ignored for months. The instigator, isolated and vulnerable, could no longer manipulate perceptions through intimidation or prejudice. Witnesses and leadership collectively reinforced a culture of accountability and fairness. The protagonist's actions, or restraint rather, had inadvertently educated everyone about resilience, courage, and professionalism. This reversal, though instantaneous, was built on months of subtle observation, patience, and strategy. It became a clear demonstration that acts of hate inevitably encounter consequences far beyond initial expectations. The office atmosphere, previously clouded by tension and bias, shifted dramatically as a new narrative took hold. Integrity and competence began defining respect, replacing the fear and manipulation previously used as leverage. The antagonist attempted to salvage dignity but failed repeatedly, with every misstep further eroding their credibility. Colleagues now openly supported the protagonist, offering both moral and professional reinforcement. The protagonist continued delivering excellence, each success silently reinforcing the moral victory. Authority and respect, once misused by the antagonist, now aligned naturally with the protagonist. This transformation demonstrated that justice in professional spaces, while subtle at first, can be absolute when the right forces align. The ripple effects continued, extending beyond immediate colleagues to management and stakeholders. Reports, newsletters, and informal communications highlighted the protagonist's professionalism and the instigator's failings. External observers began recognizing not only technical excellence but emotional intelligence and leadership potential. The antagonist's attempts to regain control were futile, with each action reinforcing prior mistakes. Meanwhile, the protagonist's quiet determination fostered admiration and loyalty, solidifying their position as a trusted and respected employee. The lessons of courage, patience, and integrity permeated the workplace culture. Even those previously unaware of the underlying dynamics became witnesses to the power of resilience over prejudice. This story emphasizes that even small acts of discrimination carry weight, accumulating consequences that eventually manifest in dramatic ways. The antagonist's arrogance, previously masked by perceived authority, had finally collided with the realities of accountability. Documentation, observation, and moral courage combined to transform a single act of racism into a full-scale reversal of fortunes. The protagonist's response, measured and dignified, became a model for handling adversity in professional environments. Colleagues' reactions, initially passive, now formed a collective voice reinforcing fairness and integrity. The office, once dominated by subtle intimidation, became a space of recognition for merit. Every act of prejudice, however casual, proved incapable of escaping scrutiny indefinitely. The antagonist faced formal inquiries, feedback sessions, and public acknowledgement of misconduct, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Their previous confidence crumbled under evidence, witness accounts, and leadership intervention. The protagonist, on the other hand, emerged stronger, respected, and vindicated, having maintained composure and focus throughout the ordeal. The shift in perception was palpable, altering both social and professional dynamics permanently. Employees who had felt powerless now witnessed the impact of courage combined with strategy. Subtle victories, accumulated over weeks, culminated in a visible and undeniable triumph of integrity. This outcome reinforced the lesson that professional environments, while complex, are ultimately governed by fairness when vigilance prevails. Leadership, having observed months of patterns and behaviors, took concrete steps to ensure such acts could not recur unchecked. HR formalized policies, documenting the antagonist's misconduct and reinforcing the importance of accountability. The protagonist's role became emblematic of resilience, professionalism, and dignity in adversity. Colleagues were inspired, recognizing the value of courage tempered with patience. The antagonist, stripped of the aura of authority, faced the stark consequences of misjudgment and bias. The office, previously tense and uncomfortable, began a slow transformation toward transparency and mutual respect. This story demonstrated the profound impact of integrity when paired with strategic observation and resilience. The climax, though immediate, was built upon months of subtle preparation, quiet endurance, and unwavering focus. Every small act, every instance of bias observed and documented, contributed to the eventual reversal. The antagonist, confident in dominance, underestimated the power of patience and professionalism. The protagonist's grace under pressure became a beacon for colleagues, influencing office culture in a lasting way. Each success, every recognition, amplified the contrast between the antagonist's arrogance and the protagonist's resilience. The ripple effects reached beyond the office, influencing perceptions among stakeholders, clients, and leadership. Ultimately, integrity prevailed, showing that sustained dignity cannot be overshadowed by temporary cruelty. Even after the immediate confrontation, the effects of the story persisted in the office culture. Employees felt empowered to speak against subtle injustices, knowing that actions have consequences. Leadership reinforced the importance of accountability, ensuring future behaviors would align with fairness. The antagonist's fall became a cautionary tale, visible to everyone who had once tolerated or ignored bias. Meanwhile, the protagonist's reputation and credibility continued to grow, inspiring trust and respect. The narrative highlighted that resilience and professionalism often create change more effectively than confrontation alone. The office, once clouded with tension, now reflected the power of ethics, patience, and moral courage. Months later, the story remained a reference point for employees and management alike, illustrating the consequences of discrimination and arrogance. Training programs, internal communications, and mentoring initiatives incorporated the lessons learned from these events. Colleagues continued supporting one another, creating an environment rooted in respect and accountability. The antagonist, still dealing with reputational damage, became a reminder of what occurs when arrogance meets justice. The protagonist's continued success served as validation for ethical and professional behavior. Each day, subtle reminders of the events reinforced the importance of observation, integrity, and courage. This legacy ensured that acts of prejudice would be met with vigilance, accountability, and ultimately justice. In the end, what began as a single, careless act of racism transformed into a story of courage, dignity, and justice. The antagonist, who believed themselves untouchable, was exposed publicly and professionally, paying the price for arrogance and prejudice. The protagonist, through patience, focus, and grace, emerged stronger, respected, and vindicated. Colleagues and leadership recognized the lessons embedded in these events, shaping the office culture positively. Every subtle act of injustice was countered by vigilance, observation, and ethical behavior. The office, once a battleground of covert prejudice, became a model of integrity and accountability. This story leaves a lasting reminder. Cruelty may appear powerful in the moment, but integrity, patience, and courage ultimately prevail.